Amish man took the dangerous widow home. She brought him peace instead. Dust blows across a silent street. The church bell tolls. A widow, whispered about as cursed, pleads for bread as the townsfolk turn their backs. They say she's dangerous, a pistol hidden in her trunk, a past too violent to forgive. But one Amish man, bound by faith and mercy, steps from the shadows. Against every warning, he lifts her and her boy onto his wagon. The town stares in shock as he just invited ruin into his home. On the quiet farmstead, her hands knead bread. Her voice hums, hymns, and something shifts. His children laugh again. His house fills with warmth, long thought lost. Yet behind the hills rides a cattle baron, furious, vowing vengeance for debts she swears were lies. When fire lights the night and neighbors whisper he's lost his senses, the Amish man must choose. Cast her out to save his peace or keep her close, risking everything for a woman branded as cursed. Did he bring danger into his home, or did he just find the one soul who could heal it? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and if this story speaks to you. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Evening shadows stretched long across Pine Ridge's dusty Main Street as Sam Lapp stood quietly by his wagon. His plain black hat cast a shadow over his weathered face while he watched Christy Bell and her young son huddled on the cold porch of the general store. The lamplight from inside cast their hunched figures in sharp relief against the darkening. Sam's heart ached at the sight. The boy couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, wrapped in his mother's thin shawl as the mountain air grew chill. Earlier that day, he'd witnessed the widow's quiet dignity crumble as she begged Mr. Peterson for just a few pounds of flour on credit. The storekeeper's harsh words still rang in Sam's ears. "We don't serve your kind here," Peterson had said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your husband brought nothing but trouble, and we ain't looking for more of the same." The other customers had turned away, some whispering behind raised hands. Sam had noticed how Christy's shoulders stiffened, but she'd kept her chin high as she led her boy out empty-handed. Now, hours later, they remained on that porch with nowhere else to go. During his evening prayers at the boarding house, Sam couldn't shake the image of mother and child, alone and hungry. His own children, Ruth and Daniel, were safe at home with the neighbor, watching over them. The thought of them ever being treated with such cruelty made his chest tight. "The stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself." The scripture verse came to him clearly as he knelt by his bed. The words wouldn't leave him be as Sam walked toward the store's porch. He heard the murmurs start. Townsfolk gathering for the evening meal at the cafe next door stopped to stare. He caught fragments of their worried whispers. "That's the Amish widower. Heard she's got a gun hidden away, asking for trouble." Mixing with her kind, the boards creaked under his steady steps. Christy looked up, wariness in her tired eyes. Her boy pressed closer to her side, one small hand clutching her skirts. Up close, Sam could see how her dress, though clean and carefully mended, was worn thin. Her face showed the same kind of bone-deep wariness he'd known after losing his Sarah. "Evening, ma'am," Sam said softly, his voice carrying the gentle lilt of his Pennsylvania Dutch upbringing. "I couldn't help but notice you and your boy out here." Christy's arms tightened around her son. "We're managing just fine, Mr. Lapp," she replied. Though her voice trembled slightly in the cold dot, Sam glanced at the small trunk beside them. The one folks claimed held a pistol. All he saw was a battered case that likely held everything they owned in the world. The sight stirred something deep in his spirit, a certainty that transcended his usual careful consideration. "Come with me," he said simply, meeting her startled gaze. "My wagon will take you home." A gasp rose from the small crowd that had gathered too. "Watch." Mr. Peterson burst out of his store, his face red with indignation. "Now see here, Lapp, the storekeeper blustered. You don't want to get mixed up with. Sam turned slightly, his quiet presence somehow filling the space more than Peterson's bluster. I reckon that's between me and the Lord's leading, he said firmly. Christy stood slowly, her son still clinging close. Why would you help us? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't know anything about me. I know what it is to be a parent alone, Sam answered honestly. I know what it is to need kindness from strangers. He gestured to his wagon. There's room enough, and my children would welcome the company. For a long moment, Christy stood motionless, searching his face. Sam waited patiently, aware of the tension crackling in the evening air. Finally, she nodded, gathering her shawl more tightly. Thank you, she said simply, dignity in every line of her bearing as she reached for her trunk. Let me help with that, Sam offered, lifting the worn case easily. He helped them up onto the wagon seat, ignoring the shocked faces and disapproving mutters from the townspeople, as Sam climbed up himself and took the reins. He heard Mr. Peterson call out, "You'll regret this, Lap. Mark my words." Sam didn't reply. He clicked softly to his team, and the wagon rolled forward into the gathering dusk. Beside him, Christy sat straight-backed, her son now relaxing slightly against her side. The first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening Colorado sky as they left Pine Ridge behind. The frost-touched morning air nipped at their faces as Sam's wagon creaked down the trail, leading away from Pine Ridge. Dawn hadn't yet broken, but a pale glow touched the eastern horizon, promising another clear Colorado day. The steady clip-clop of hooves and the gentle sway of the wagon were the only sounds breaking the pre-dawn stillness. Christy. Belle sat straight-backed on the wagon bench. Her young son pressed close against her side for warmth. Their single trunk rattled softly behind them with each bump in the trail. Sam noticed how the boy's eyes kept drifting to the team of horses, curiosity playing on his small face despite his wariness. "Those are fine horses, mister," the child finally whispered, his words forming little clouds in the cold air. Sam's beard twitched with a gentle smile. "That they are. The brown one is called Maple, and the darker one is Thunder." He clicked his tongue softly at the team. Good, steady workers, both of them. The boy's eyes widened at the names, and he leaned forward slightly. "Do they pull the plow too?" "Yeah, they help with all manner of work," Sam replied, his Pennsylvania Dutch accent warming the simple words. "The Lord provides good creatures to aid us in our labors." As the sun climbed higher, frost sparkled on the prairie grass, stretching away on either side of the trail. Sam pointed out a hawk circling overhead, searching for its breakfast. "Looks to be fair weather coming," he observed. "Good day for getting the winter wheat planted." Christy's hands twisted in her lap. "I'm afraid I don't know much about farming," she admitted quietly. "But I can cook well enough. I'm willing to learn whatever's needed." "Cooking is a fine skill," Sam assured her. "My Ruth tries her best, but she's only 10. Having help in the kitchen would be a blessing." When they stopped to rest the horses at midday, Sam bowed his head in a quiet prayer before sharing out bread and cheese. Christy noticed there wasn't a weapon in sight. No rifle mounted behind the seat, no pistol on his hip. Just simple tools, a hammer, a saw, and other implements of honest work. The afternoon sun was lowering when they finally turned onto a narrow dirt track. "This is our land," Sam explained. "Not much compared to some, but enough to be grateful for." His homestead came into view, a sturdy 2-story house built of rough-hewn logs, its windows gleaming in the late light. A well-maintained barn stood nearby, and several milk cows grazed in a fenced pasture. Smoke curled from the chimney. Speaking of warmth within, 2 children appeared in the doorway. Daniel, a lanky boy of 12, and his sister Ruth, her plain dress and cap marking her as unmistakably Amish. They stared wide-eyed as Sam helped Christy and her son down from the wagon. "Daniel, help me with their trunk," Sam called. "Ruth, please show Mrs. Bell where she and her boy can wash up before supper." The evening meal was a quiet affair, broken only by the clink of spoons against bowls. Christy stood from the table as soon as the dishes were cleared. "Please, let me help with tomorrow's bread," she offered. "It's the least I can do." Ruth watched in fascination as Christy's experienced hands worked the dough, showing her how to knead it just right. The girl's initial shyness began to fade as they worked side by side. After the bread was set to rise, Sam gathered everyone for evening prayers. He read from his well-worn Bible, his deep voice steady and sure. Christy sat respectfully quiet, her son finally relaxing enough to lean against her arm as the children prepared for bed. Christy began to hum softly, an old hymn that seemed to float in the lamplight. Her clear, sweet voice carried up the stairs, and Sam's hand stilled on the account book he'd been studying. The melody stirred something in his heart, a bittersweet ache that reminded him of Sarah, his late wife, who had often sung while putting their children to bed. Ruth appeared at the top of the stairs in her nightgown, drawn by the music. "That's pretty," she said shyly. "Could you teach me that song sometime?" Christy's humming faded to a gentle smile. "Of course, dear. I know lots of hymns." Sam watched as his daughter's face brightened. It had been too long since music had filled these rooms. Perhaps, he thought, the Lord's ways were indeed mysterious, bringing light and warmth back to his home through the most unexpected means. Daniel joined his sister on the stairs, their usual bedtime restlessness replaced by calm attention to Christy's voice as she began another gentle tune. The peaceful atmosphere settled over the household like a soft blanket, pushing back the shadows of loneliness that had lingered there for so long. Dawn painted the kitchen windows in soft gold as Christy moved quietly around Sam's kitchen. She had risen before anyone else, determined to show her gratitude through service. The familiar motions of cooking brought comfort as she mixed batter and stoked the cook stove. To just the right heat, the aroma of flapjacks soon filled the house. Sam descended the stairs to find his children already seated at the table, their faces bright with anticipation. Ruth watched in wonder as Christy expertly flipped each cake to golden perfection. Even Daniel, usually so reserved, leaned forward eagerly when she set the steaming plate before him. "There's fresh butter, too," Christy said softly, placing a small crock on the table. "I found the churn this morning and thought it might be nice." Sam's throat tightened. Sarah had always made fresh butter. The children hadn't tasted any since her passing. He'd never managed to get it quite right himself. Now Ruth and Daniel were spreading it thick on their flapjacks, sharing grins he hadn't seen in too long after the meal. Christy's boy pitched in without being asked, helping Ruth carry dishes to the wash basin. Their small hands worked together, one washing while the other dried, their earlier shyness beginning to fade. "Time for the morning milking," Sam announced, catching Christy's eye. "Would you like to learn?" She nodded, following him out to the barn. The morning air was crisp, and their boots left tracks in the dewy grass. Inside, the sweet smell of hay and the warm presence of the cows created a peaceful atmosphere. "Here now," Sam said, positioning the milk pail. "It's all in the rhythm." He demonstrated the proper technique, then stepped aside to let Christy try. Her first attempts sent milk spraying in wrong directions, and her startled laugh echoed in the barn. "Oh my!" She wiped drops from her face, still chuckling. "I reckon this takes more skill than I thought." Sam found himself smiling at her determination. "You'll get it. Just be gentle but firm." He guided her hands to the right position, and soon a steady stream of milk was hitting the pail. The morning's peace was broken by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Sam straightened as Jacob Fisher rode into the yard, his usually cheerful face drawn with worry. "Sam," Jacob called, dismounting quickly. "A word, if you please." They stepped outside the barn, leaving Christy to practice her milking. Jacob's voice dropped low. "There's talk in town about your guest. Sam, do you know what trouble you might be bringing on yourself?" Sam's expression remained calm. "Speak plain, Jacob." Her husband left debts. "Sam, big ones owed to Amos Harlan himself." Jacob glanced nervously at the barn. "They say Harlan's already asking questions about where the widow Bell ran to. He means to collect, one way or another." "Debts?" Sam's brow furrowed. "What kind of debts?" "The kind that could cost a man his land." Jacob laid a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Harlan's not known for mercy, Sam. He could claim your farm as payment if you're harboring her. Think of your children." Sam stood silent, watching the morning sun climb higher. His children's laughter drifted from the house, mixed with the sound of Christy's boy joining their play. Inside the barn, he could hear Christy humming as she worked. "I appreciate your warning, friend," Sam said finally, "but I cannot turn away those in need. It wouldn't be right before God." Jacob shook his head. "Your heart's too soft, Sam. I pray it doesn't bring you grief." He mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Sam to his thoughts. That evening, after the children were abed, Sam sat at the kitchen table reviewing his ledger by lamplight. A soft step made him look up. Christy stood nearby, one of his work shirts in her hands. "I noticed this was torn," she said. "Please, let me mend it." She settled into Sarah's old rocking chair, her needle flashing in the lamplight as she worked. The familiar creak of the rocker filled the quiet kitchen. "I'm tired of running," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tired of the whispers and sideways looks. Tired of being blamed for things I never did." Her hands stilled. "But I won't bring trouble to your door, Sam. If you want us to leave, no." Sam's voice was firm, but gentle. "You need not run any more. Whatever comes, we'll face it with faith and prayer." Christy's eyes glistened in the lamplight as she met his steady gaze. Then she nodded once and returned to her mending. The soft sound of her humming mixing with the creak of the rocker and the quiet tick of the mantel clock. 2 days passed like a gentle stream, each hour bringing new warmth to Sam's homestead. The morning sun found Christy gathering Sam's children in the sitting room, her voice soft as she began teaching them the hymns of her childhood. "My mother taught me this one when I was just your age," she told Ruth and Daniel, who sat cross-legged on the floor before her. "'Tis a song about God's endless mercy." From his place at the woodworking bench near the window, Sam's hands slowed their steady motion as the first notes filled the air. Christy's clear voice rose sweet and true, and soon the children's voices joined hers. Hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound. Their voices blended in harmony. And Sam felt something in his chest loosen, like winter ice giving way to spring thaw. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Christy lingered at the kitchen table. Her fingers traced patterns on the worn wood as Sam cleaned his spectacles. "There's something you should know," she said quietly, "about my husband's dealings with Amos Harlan." She glanced toward the stairs, ensuring the children were out of earshot. "The debts Harlan claims, they aren't honest ones." Sam set his spectacles down, giving her his full attention. "My husband kept records," Christy continued. "Harlan would inflate the amounts, add interest that was never agreed upon. He's been doing it to others, too, breaking them with false debts. That's a serious charge." Sam said carefully, "I know." Christy's hands twisted in her apron. I have proof." But if Harlan knew, she fell silent, fear shadowing her face. Later that night, when the house lay quiet, Christy lit a single candle and opened her trunk. Beneath carefully folded dresses and her mother's quilt, she withdrew a folded paper. Her hands trembled as she smoothed it open, revealing columns of numbers and Harlan's bold signature at the bottom. The true amounts were there, alongside the inflated figures, evidence of his fraud. She started at a creak in the floorboards, quickly refolding the paper and tucking it away. The weight of it seemed to press on her heart, heavy with both truth and danger. Sunday morning brought both promise and trial. The Amish meeting house stood plain against the sky as families gathered for worship. Sam helped Christy and the children down from the wagon. Aware of the subtle shift in the atmosphere as they approached, the service proceeded as always, with hymns and scripture, but underneath ran currents of unease. During the fellowship meal, Sam couldn't miss the way certain elders drew together. Their voices low, but their glances sharp. Elder Yoder approached Sam as he filled cups with water. "The English widow," he said softly. "She brings attention we do not need. Our way is to remain separate, Samuel." Another elder joined them. "We hear rumors of violence following in her wake." "Think of the community, Samuel." Sam noticed Christy across the room. Saw how she registered the cold looks, the way women drew their children closer when she passed. Her face remained composed, but he recognized the shame in her downcast eyes. When it came time for testimonies, Sam rose slowly to his feet. The meeting house fell silent. "I wish to give thanks," he said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner. "For Christy Bell, who has brought care and comfort to my children, who rises early to prepare their meals, who teaches them songs of praise, who shows them daily what it means to face hardship with grace." Whispers rustled through the gathering. But Sam remained standing, his quiet strength a challenge to the gossip. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the farmyard, Christy knelt beside her sleeping son's bed. Her whispered prayer carried through the partially open door where Sam passed in the hallway. "Lord," she prayed, "I ask not for myself, but for a chance to live honest and true, to teach my boy what's right, to repay kindness with kindness," her voice caught. "And Lord, thank you for bringing us to this place of peace." Sam stood motionless in the hallway, struck by the simple sincerity of her words. In that moment, he knew with certainty that whatever trouble Harlan might bring, Christy's heart held no violence, only a deep yearning for honest living and God's grace. Through the window came the evening song of meadowlarks, mixing with the last notes of Christy's prayer. The sound settled over the homestead like a blessing, a promise of peace yet to come. The spring morning dawned crisp and clear as Sam hitched his team for the journey to town. The seed merchants would have their new stock in, and the fields wouldn't plant themselves. "I reckon I'll be back before supper," he told Christy, who stood on the porch with a shawl pulled tight against the morning chill. "We'll manage fine," she assured him, already planning the day's tasks. "Ruth and I mean to brighten up those windows with new curtains." Sam nodded, clicking to his horses. The wagon wheels creaked as they rolled down the rutted path, leaving Christy and the children waving from the yard in town. Sam had just finished loading sacks of seed when a shadow fell across the wagon. Amos Harlan stood there, his expensive boots planted wide on the dusty street. Two ranch hands lingered nearby, their hands resting too casual-like on their gun belts. "Lap," Harlan said, his voice carrying just enough for nearby townspeople to hear. "That widow you're harboring owes me money, considerable money." Sam straightened slowly. "The Lord teaches us to show kindness to widows and orphans." Harlan's laugh held no warmth. "The Lord ain't got nothing to do with business, friend. Either she pays what's owed, or she leaves your property." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "An Amish man can't fight what's coming. Best remember that." Sam said nothing, but his jaw tightened as he climbed onto the wagon seat. Harlan's threats followed him out of town like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Back at the homestead, sunshine and song filled the kitchen. Christy sat at the table with Ruth, showing her how to make neat stitches in the fresh cotton fabric they'd selected for curtains. The girl's fingers moved carefully, her face bright with concentration. "That's right," Christy encouraged. "Small and even, just like that." She glanced over at Daniel, who stood at the counter carefully measuring cornmeal into a bowl. "How's that cornbread coming along?" "Think I got it right this time," Daniel said. His tongue caught between his teeth as he added buttermilk to the mix. Through the window, Christy watched her young son playing near the barn, stacking bits of wood into make-believe corrals. Her heart warmed at how quickly he'd taken to farm life. But then she saw him freeze, staring at something in the distance. Several riders passed along the far property line, their shapes dark against the afternoon sky. Her boy ran inside, his face pale. "Just some men riding past," Christy soothed, though her own heart had jumped. "Come help your friend Daniel with his baking." When Sam returned that evening, Christy noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept straying to the windows. But he said nothing of his troubles as they sat down to supper. Bowing his head to give thanks for the meal, and the company gathered around his table. After the dishes were cleared and the children settled with their books, Christy began to sing while she darned socks by the fire. Sam sat nearby, working beeswax into a length of harness leather, the lamplight casting warm shadows on the walls. Her voice rose clear and sweet, the old hymn speaking of trust in troubled times. "In the valley, he restoreth my soul." Sam's hands slowed their work as he listened. Something in her voice seemed to lift the weight of Harlan's threats, if only for a moment. Yet shadows still pressed at the edges of his heart. Finally, when the house had grown quiet and the children's soft breathing could be heard from upstairs, Christy rose and went to her trunk. She returned with a folded paper, handling it like it might burn her fingers. "I need to show you something," she said softly, smoothing the page open on the table between them. "This is why Harlan wants me gone." Sam adjusted his spectacles, studying the neat columns of figures. His eyes widened as he saw the discrepancies. Honest debts doubled, even tripled, with impossible interest added. At the bottom stood Harlan's bold signature, damning in its arrogance. "He's been breaking folks with these false debts," Christy whispered, "running them off their land. My husband, he kept this page as insurance." Before he died, Sam touched the paper gently, understanding now the full weight of what Christy carried. This single page could expose Harlan's schemes, bring justice to those he'd wronged. But using it would mean standing against the cattle baron's power, inviting danger to their door. Saying nothing felt wrong in his soul. Yet speaking out could cost them everything. He looked at Christy in the lamplight, seeing both strength and fear in her eyes. Whatever choice they made, they would make it together. A gentle rhythm settled over the homestead as spring deepened into warmth. Each morning, Christy rose before dawn to kindle the stove and prepare breakfast, her movements growing more confident in the familiar kitchen. The aroma of fresh coffee and baking bread filled the house, drawing sleepy children down the stairs and bringing a quiet smile to Sam's weathered face in the small kitchen garden. Christy planted herbs in neat rows, thyme, sage, and mint that would flavor their meals and soothe winter coughs. Her slender fingers worked the soil with care, teaching Ruth the old ways her mother had passed down. "Every plant has its purpose," she explained, showing the girl how to pinch back the stems for stronger growth. The worn quilts that had lain forgotten in the trunk upstairs found new life under Christy's patient needle. In the evenings, she sorted fabric scraps by candlelight, piecing together patterns while humming softly. Ruth often curled beside her, learning to match colors and stitch straight seams. Daniel, usually so serious, began to laugh more freely. He proudly showed Christy how to feed the chickens and collect eggs without getting pecked. Her son followed him everywhere, soaking up farm knowledge like a sponge. Sam watched these changes with mixed emotions. Joy warmed his heart at seeing his home filled with life again, yet guilt gnawed at him in quiet moments. Would Sarah, his late wife, think him disloyal for finding comfort in another woman's presence? He wrestled with these thoughts during his evening prayers, seeking guidance. One evening, as they gathered around the supper table, heavy boots clomped onto the porch. Without knocking, 3 men from neighboring farms entered: Jacob Miller, John Yoder, and Peter Stoltzfus. Their faces were grim beneath their broad-brimmed hats. "Samuel," Jacob said, his voice stern, "we must speak with you." About this situation, Christie's hands trembled as she set down her fork. "I should go," she whispered, starting to rise. "No." Sam's quiet voice held firm. "You will stay. This is your place at this table." The neighbors shifted uncomfortably, but Sam gestured to empty chairs. "Sit, if you've come to talk." "Brother Lapp," Peter began, "we speak out of concern. This woman, her presence here brings danger to all of us. Already Harlan's men watch the roads. Violence follows her kind." Her kind. Sam's words were soft but carried weight. And what kind would that be, Brother Stoltzfus? A widow? An orphaned child? He reached for his worn Bible, pages marked with yarn snippets. "Shall we read together what Scripture says about our duty to such as these?" "The English world is not our concern," John protested. "Is it not?" Sam opened to familiar verses. "Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction." James, chapter 1, verse 27. His finger moved to another passage. "Defend the poor and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and needy." The visitors fell silent, unable to argue against the ancient words. Christie sat very still, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I appreciate your concern," Sam continued. "But this household stands under God's protection, and all who shelter here share in that peace." After the men departed, Christie helped clear the table with trembling hands. When the children were settled upstairs, she found Sam on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so weary of being seen as cursed, of bringing trouble wherever I go. Your kindness?" She wiped her eyes with her apron. "There is no curse here," Sam said firmly. "Only God's children seeking His peace. In this home, that peace will remain." Later that evening, as Christie tucked her son into bed, the boy caught her hand. "Mama," he asked sleepily, "can we stay here forever? With Mr. Sam and Ruth and Daniel?" Christie smoothed his hair, her heart aching with hope and fear. "That's not for us to decide, sweetheart. But we're safe here," the child insisted. Mr. Sam said so. Sam's quiet voice came from the doorway, where he'd paused while checking on his own children. "That you are, little one? That you will always be, as long as you're with me?" The boy smiled, content with this assurance, and drifted off to sleep. Christie met Sam's eyes in the dim lamplight, seeing in them the same mixture of certainty and uncertainty that filled her own heart. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight they had found shelter in simple truth. Peace could grow even in the shadow of storms. Sunday morning dawned clear and cool. Christie smoothed her plain dress with trembling hands, pinning her hair neatly beneath a borrowed cap. Sam's children were already dressed in their Sunday best, faces scrubbed and shoes polished. Her own son fidgeted with his borrowed collar, but stayed quiet. Sensing the importance of the day, the ride to the meeting house was silent, save for the creak of wagon wheels and the gentle clip-clop of hooves on the packed dirt road. Christie's heart hammered against her ribs as the simple white building came into view. Other wagons were already lined up outside. Curious eyes turned to watch their approach inside. The meeting house was spare but peaceful, with wooden benches arranged in neat rows. Sunlight streamed through plain glass windows, casting warm squares on the plank floor. Sam led them to a bench near the middle, ignoring the whispers that followed their path. Before the service began, 3 elders approached Sam. Their stern faces and stiff shoulders spoke volumes. Before they opened their mouths, Brother Lapp, the eldest, said quietly, "We must speak about your guest. Our ways are not the English ways. We keep ourselves separate for good reason." Sam sat straight-backed, his calm gaze steady. "I understand your concerns, Brother Miller, but perhaps today's scripture will guide us." The service began with familiar hymns sung in German, the melody rising and falling like waves. When it came time for the sermon, Sam stood, his Bible open to Matthew's Gospel. From the Sermon on the Mount, he began, his voice clear and strong. "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." His eyes swept the congregation. Peace is not merely the absence of conflict. True peace requires action, sheltering those who suffer, protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Christy felt the weight of every gaze, some hostile, some uncertain. Without planning to, she rose to her feet. "May I?" Her voice quavered, then steadied. "May I share a hymn?" After a moment's hesitation, the elder nodded. Christy closed her eyes, drawing a deep breath. The melody that poured forth was one her grandmother had taught her. An old song of trust in times of trouble. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." Her voice trembled at first, then grew stronger. The familiar words filled the meeting house, touching something deep and true in every heart present. By the final verse, she heard other voices joining hers, creating a harmony that brought tears to more than one weathered face. When the last note faded, silence held for several heartbeats. Then Sarah Yoder, one of the community's respected women, dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. The tension in the room had shifted, softened like spring earth after rain. After the service ended, several women approached Christy. Their faces were kind now, their words gentle. "Such a beautiful voice," Sarah Yoder said, touching Christy's arm. "You must teach us that arrangement." "Your boy has good manners," another added, smiling at Christy's son. He sat so still during service. The ride home felt lighter, as if a heavy cloud had lifted. Back at the farmstead, the children raced to change out of their Sunday clothes while Christy began preparing the evening meal. Soon Ruth and Daniel joined her in the kitchen, eager to help knead bread and peel potatoes. Sam paused in the doorway, watching. Laughter spilled from the kitchen as Daniel showed Christy's son how to shape dinner rolls. Ruth hummed the hymn from church while she worked. The scene before him was so natural, so right, his home warm with life again after the long winter of grief. But as dusk painted the sky in purple and gold, rapid hoofbeats approached the house. Sam stepped onto the porch to meet a young man from town, his horse lathered from hard riding. "Mr. Lapp," the messenger panted, "I came as quick as I could. It's Harlan. He's in a rage about today." Word spread about the widow being welcomed at your church. He glanced nervously over his shoulder. "He says no one makes him look fool, letting her get settled here. He's planning something, sir." Something bad. Sam's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Thank you for the warning, friend. God will see us through whatever comes." Inside, he could still hear the cheerful sounds of his family. Yes, his family now preparing supper together. The peace they'd found was precious and fragile. But he would protect it, come what may. 2 nights after the church service, darkness wrapped the farmstead in silence. Only crickets and a distant coyote disturbed the peace. The moon hung half full above, casting silver shadows across the yard between house and barn. Sam slept fitfully, troubled by the messenger's warning. A sharp crack jolted him awake. Smoke thick and acrid crept under his door. He leaped from bed, heart pounding. Fire! The cry tore from his throat as he rushed to wake his children. Everyone out. Now. Christy was already up, shepherding Ruth and Daniel toward the door. But her face went white with terror. My boy? He was playing in the barn loft before bed. I thought he came in, but orange flames licked the night sky, illuminating the barn in hellish light. Smoke poured from the hayloft window where fresh summer grass lay stored. The main door stood open, revealing an inferno inside. Thomas. Christy screamed, running toward the blazing building. Thomas, where are you? A small voice answered from inside. Mama, I'm scared. Sam caught up to Christy before she could charge in. Stay here. Watch my children. His quiet voice carried steel beneath its calm. Without waiting for response, he pulled his broad-brimmed hat low and plunged into the smoke. Heat slammed into him like a physical wall. Flames crawled up the wooden walls, consuming decades of seasoned timber. Through stinging eyes, he searched the stalls. Thomas, call out again. Here, the boy's voice came from behind a stack of hay bales. Sam found him curled in a corner, coughing in the thickening smoke. Cover your face with my hat, Sam ordered, scooping the boy up. The roof groaned ominously overhead. Burning straw rained down as support beams weakened. They were halfway to the door when a massive crack split the air. Sam dove forward, shielding Thomas with his body as the roof collapsed behind them. They tumbled into the cool night air just as the entire structure gave way with a thunderous roar. Christy ran to them, gathering her son in trembling arms. Tears cut clean tracks through the soot on her face. Thank God, she whispered. Thank God. She touched Sam's smoke-stained cheek. You saved him. But your barn, your livestock, Sam's dairy cows, had escaped through the open door. But his winter hay, his tools, his stored grain all, lost. The barn his father had helped him raise 15 years ago now burned like a funeral pyre. Neighbors began arriving, drawn by the flames visible for miles. They formed a bucket line from the well, but it was too late to save anything. Whispers circled through the gathering crowd. It's her, someone muttered. Bringing trouble, just like we warned. Harlan's work. Mark my words, should never have taken them in. Christy heard every word. She clutched Thomas's tighter, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. This is my fault. All my fault. Sam stood straight, despite his exhaustion and burns. In a clear voice that carried across the yard, he began to pray. Lord, we thank you for sparing lives tonight. We trust in your protection and guidance. Give us strength to stand firm in what is right. No matter the cost, the whispers died away, shamed by his steadfast faith as false dawn painted the sky in shades of gray. Sam began sorting through the smoking ruins. His hands already blistered from the rescue, gripped charred timbers as he assessed what could be salvaged. A few tools might be saved. Some of the foundation stones could be reused. Christy approached him, Thomas's hand held tight in hers. Her face was drawn with guilt and resolve. We should go. You've risked too much already. You've risked too much already. Sam straightened, wiping soot from his forehead. No, but your barn, your livelihood, can be rebuilt. His gentle eyes held hers. Peace cannot come by running from evil. It comes by standing firm against it. The neighbors are right. I've brought danger to your door. The danger was already here, in Harlan's greed and cruelty. You and Thomas brought life back to this home. God led you here for a purpose. Christy's tears fell freely now. How can you still want us here? Because this is where you belong. Sam's words were simple, but carried the weight of absolute conviction. We face this together as a family. The sun rose fully, painting the smoking ruins in golden light. Sam's children joined them, Ruth carrying a plate of bread, Daniel with a jug of water. Together they broke their fast among the ashes, heads bowed in prayer for strength to face whatever came next. Morning dew dampened the ashes as, Sam surveyed the barn's remains. His strong hands gripped a weathered hammer, determination set in his jaw despite exhaustion. Ruth and Daniel worked alongside him, gathering scattered nails from the ruins while Christy's boy, Talmus, held boards steady. "We'll raise a temporary shelter here," Sam explained, marking lines in the dirt. "The animals need protection before winter comes." Christy appeared with a bucket of fresh water, her sleeves rolled up. "I can help nail the crossbeams," she offered. But her voice wavered at the suspicious stares from townspeople gathering at the fence line. Sam noticed they're watching, eyes but nodded gratefully. Much obliged. Throughout the morning, they worked steadily. Christy proved surprisingly capable with tools, though her hands trembled whenever horses approached on the road. Each passing rider might be one of Harlan's men. By midday, they'd managed to erect the frame of a basic lean-to. The sound of wagon wheels announced Jacoby Fisher's arrival. He brought lunch-fresh bread and apple butter, but his face was grim as he pulled Sam aside. "Brother, you must see reason," Jacob pleaded, glancing toward Christy. "The woman brings danger. First, the threats. Now, your barn burned. What next? Your house. Your children." Christy stood frozen by the water barrel, Jacob's words carrying clearly across the yard. Her fingers gripped the ladle until her knuckles went white. "The community talks of shunning," Sam Jacob continued. "Send her away before worse comes." Christy didn't wait to hear Sam's response. She hurried inside, her shoulders shaking. Through the window, she watched Sam's tired face as Jacob spoke on. The usual steadiness in Sam's expression had cracked, revealing doubt beneath. That evening, after the children were asleep, Christy found Sam sitting alone on the porch steps. The night air carried the lingering scent of smoke. "I'm leaving at dawn," she said softly. "I've caused enough destruction." Sam stared at his blistered hands, not answering. The silence stretched between them like a widening river. "Your friend Jacob speaks truth," Christy continued, her voice breaking. I thought God had led me here for peace. But I only brought fire and pain." Still, Sam said nothing. His faith visibly shaken by the loss of his barn, the work of generations reduced to ash. Because he'd chosen mercy. Christy touched his shoulder gently. "Thank you for showing us kindness when no one else would. I'll pray for your protection always." Inside, she packed by lamplight, folding the few dresses she owned into her trunk. Her fingers traced the ledger page hidden in its lining, the proof of Harlan's fraud that had cost them so dearly. Tears fell as she remembered Ruth's laughter in the kitchen, Daniel's shy smiles. The way Sam's quiet strength had made her feel safe for the first time in years. "Dear Lord," she whispered. Kneeling beside her bed, "protect this good man and his children. Let no more harm come to them because of me." The night passed slowly. Christy didn't sleep, listening instead to the peaceful breathing of her son, memorizing the creaks and settling sounds of the house that had briefly been home. Before first light touched the horizon, she dragged her trunk to the wagon, each step heavy with grief. Dawn painted the sky in gentle pink when Sam emerged from the house. He stopped short at the sight of her trunk. "Please," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Don't go." Christy shook her head, tears spilling. "I have to. Look what I've brought to your door already." "You brought more than trouble," Sam insisted. "You brought life back to this home." The children smile again. They're singing in the kitchen. "Peace returned with you. Peace." Christy's laugh was bitter. "Your barn lies in ashes. Your neighbor's whisper of shunning. Your friend warns of worse to come, then let it come." Sam stepped closer. "Running from evil only gives it power. Standing firm in faith that brings true peace. I cannot bear to see another home destroyed because of me." Christy turned away, unable to meet his earnest gaze. Better I face Harlan's anger alone than risk your children's safety. The choice isn't yours alone anymore. Sam's gentle words held steel beneath. We face this together as a family. Family. The word caught in Christy's throat. I lost the right to family when I married a violent man. No. Sam took her trembling hands in his calloused ones. God's grace gives second chances. Every sunrise brings new mercy. Christy's resolve wavered. In Sam's steady eyes, she saw not judgment but acceptance, not fear but faith. Still, the memory of flames devouring the barn haunted her. I cannot stay, she whispered. Your home, your children, they mean too much to risk. Sam's weathered hands tightened on the wagon reins. Then I'm coming with you to town. Christy's eyes widened. No, you can't risk not to send you away, Sam interrupted gently, to stand beside you. The Lord doesn't call us to run from evil, but to face it with truth. The morning sun climbed higher as they loaded Christy's trunk. Ruth and Daniel watched wide-eyed while Sam arranged care with a neighbor woman. He touched the Bible in his coat pocket, drawing strength from its familiar weight. The wagon wheels creaked along the trail to Pine Ridge. Christy sat rigid beside. Sam, her son Thomas, nestled between them. Dust rose from the horse's hooves as Sam's mind drifted to memories of his late wife Hannah. Hannah always said mercy wasn't just feeling, Sam spoke softly. It was doing, standing firm when others turned away. Christy glanced at him, surprised by the mention of his wife. She would have welcomed you same as I did, Sam continued. Seeing your courage these weeks, it reminds me of her spirit. How she'd face trouble with quiet faith. I don't feel courageous, Christy whispered. Yet here you are, choosing truth over safety. Sam's voice held warmth. That's the purest kind of courage. The town appeared ahead, buildings sharp against the morning sky. People stopped to stare as Sam guided the wagon down Main Street. Whispers followed their progress like autumn leaves in the wind. Look there, the Amish widower, with that bellwoman. Heard his barn burned, Sam pulled the horses to a halt in the center of town. Amos Harlan stood outside the saloon, his expensive boots and watch chain gleaming. His face darkened at the sight of them. Double quotes, well? Harlan's voice carried across the street. Come to settle those debts at last. Sam stepped down from the wagon, his plain black coat a stark contrast to Harlan's flashy vest. The Bible in his hand caught the sunlight. I come seeking justice, Sam declared, his quiet voice somehow filling the space. The Lord abhors false weights and measures. You've weighted your scales with lies, Amos Harlan. A crowd gathered, drawn by the confrontation between the plain-speaking Amish man and the cattle baron. Harlan's hand twitched near his gun belt. Watch your tongue. Lap. Your peaceful ways won't protect you from slander. Christy stood slowly, her fingers steady as she reached into her shawl. The slander is yours, Mr. Harlan. She unfolded the ledger page, holding it high. Your own hand wrote these false debts. Inflated numbers, made-up loans. Her clear voice rang out as she read the figures. $2,000 claimed from the Miller farm, but only $500 true. $1,500 from the widow Jenkins, when she borrowed just $300. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Townspeople pressed closer. Recognition dawning on their faces that matches what he claimed from my store. The general store owner called out, and my livery stable. Added another voice. He threatened to take my land over $600, an old farmer declared. Said I owed $2,000. Harlan's face twisted with rage. You can't prove your signature stands witness, Christy interrupted, her voice stronger now. And these good people know the truth of it. How many others have you bullied with false debts? How many homes and businesses stolen through fraud? The crowd's anger turned like a tide. Years of fear and resentment surfaced in their faces as they stared at Harlan. "The sheriff needs to see this," someone shouted. "Send for the marshal in Cedar Ridge." Harlan's hand moved toward his gun, but Sam stepped between him and Christy. Though unarmed, Sam's quiet strength made the cattle baron hesitate. "Violence won't hide truth," Sam said firmly. "Your grip on this town ends today. Grip on this town ends today." Several men moved to surround Harlan, faces grim with purpose. The sheriff emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. Christy handed him the ledger page with steady hands. "I've carried this proof too long in fear," she said clearly. "I won't be silent anymore." The sheriff studied the document, his expression hardening. He gestured to his deputy. "Take Mr. Harlan into custody. Send word to Cedar Ridge. The marshal will want to see this evidence of fraud." Harlan's laughter cut through the tense silence. "You think that scrap of paper means anything?" He swept his arm toward the sheriff. "Tell them, Darnell. Tell them how things really work in Pine Ridge." Sheriff Darnell shifted his weight, studying the dusty boards of the walkway. His badge caught the morning light, a dull glint against his worn vest. "I've got friends in every courthouse from here to Denver," Harlan continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "One telegram, and that evidence disappears. One word, and witnesses forget what they saw." But something had changed in the townsfolk. Sam's quiet strength seemed to flow through the crowd like a fresh spring wind. One by one, people stepped forward. "I'll testify," declared old Jim Wheeler, the livery owner. His weathered hands trembled, but his voice stayed firm. "Been keeping records of every false debt. Got witnesses to the threats, too." Sarah Jenkins, a widow who'd lost her farm, raised her voice. "Me too. Got the real loan papers hidden away. Show the truth of what he'd done." More voices joined in, a chorus of long-suppressed grievances finally finding air. Each testimony strengthened the others, like stones building a wall against Harlan's power. The sheriff's face showed the struggle within. Years of looking the other way, warred with the weight of public witness. His hand touched the ledger page Christy had given him, fingers tracing the damning numbers. "Mr. Harlan," Sheriff Darnell spoke slowly, "I reckon there's enough here to warrant investigation." Harlan's face darkened. "You ungrateful cur. After all I've done for you, after all you've done to us." Someone in the crowd corrected. Sam stood unmoved, his plain black coat a stark contrast to Harlan's fine suit, though his hands stayed peacefully at his sides. His presence radiated certainty. "The Lord sees all accounts," Sam said quietly, "even those hidden in darkness." Harlan's hand darted toward his gun belt. "Then let him watch this." But before he could draw, 3 ranch handsmen who'd worked his own cattle grabbed his arms. The pistol clattered to the dirt, unfired. Sheriff Darnell snatched it up, newfound resolution straightening his spine. "Amos Harlan," the sheriff announced, voice carrying across the suddenly silent street. "You're under arrest for fraud and attempted assault. You can't do this." Harlan thrashed against the hands, restraining him. "I own this town." "Not anymore," the sheriff replied, producing his handcuffs. The steel clinked loud in the morning air. "Deputy, send that telegram to Cedar Ridge. Tell Marshal Wilson we need him here with fraud warrants." Christy's fingers found Sam's calloused hand, gripping tight. Tears tracked down her cheeks, but her shoulders stayed straight with pride. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in me when no one else would." Sam squeezed her hand gently. Truth has its own strength. Just needed someone brave enough to speak it. The deputy led Harlan toward the jail. The cattle baron's protests fading into impotent threats. People gathered around Sam and Christy, offering apologies, sharing their own stories of Harlan's cruelty. Through the afternoon, more evidence emerged. Ledgers were recovered from Harlan's office, showing years of systematic fraud. Farmers and merchants who'd fled Pine Ridge sent telegrams confirming similar schemes. By evening, the town hummed with the news. Amos Harlan, the great cattle baron, sat in a cell. His empire of fear had crumbled before the simple courage of an Amish widower and a determined woman. The setting sun painted the mountains gold as townspeople gathered in the square. Someone brought out fiddles. Children played freely, no longer warned to avoid Harlan's notice. The air itself seemed lighter, as if a great weight had lifted from the land. Christy stood beside Sam on the general store's porch, watching the celebration. Her son Thomas played with Ruth and Daniel, their laughter mixing with the music. "I never thought I'd see this day," Christy said softly, "when the truth would finally come to light." "The Lord's timing is perfect," Sam replied, his quiet voice holding warmth. "Even when we don't understand the waiting." Around them, Pine Ridge buzzed with new energy. Neighbors spoke freely, sharing food and stories. The shadow of fear that had darkened the town for so long had finally lifted, revealing the community's true heart. The wagon wheels creaked softly as Sam guided the team homeward. Christy sat beside him, her shoulders lighter now that Harlan's shadow no longer darkened their path. The setting sun painted the Colorado mountains in shades of purple and gold, promising a peaceful evening ahead. As they crested the final hill, Christy gasped. A dozen wagons stood in the yard, and twice as many men worked by the burned barn. Fresh-cut timber lay stacked neatly, and the sound of hammers rang across the property. "They came," Sam said softly, wonder in his voice. The same neighbors who had warned him against harboring. Christy now labored to rebuild what hatred had destroyed. Jacob approached as Sam halted the wagon. "News traveled fast about Harlan's arrest," he said, extending his hand to help Christy down. "Figured it was time we showed where we truly stand." Christy's boy Thomas leaped from the wagon, spotting Ruth and Daniel playing near the water pump. The children's laughter carried across the yard, pure and untroubled by adult concerns. "Much obliged," Sam said, his plain words carrying deep feeling. He removed his black coat and rolled up his sleeves, ready to work alongside the others. The men had already cleared away the charred timbers and laid out foundation stones. Elder Miller, who had once questioned Sam's judgment most strongly, now directed the raising of the frame with careful precision. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," Elder Miller said as Sam joined them. "Sometimes it takes a stranger to help us see our own hearts more clearly." Christy watched the men work for a moment, then turned toward the house. "I'll prepare supper for everyone," she announced. "It's the least I can do." Inside, she found several women had already taken over her kitchen. Mary Yoder kneaded bread dough, while Sarah Stoltzfus stirred a huge pot of beef stew. The air filled with a warm sense of baking and friendship. "We brought what we could," Mary said, smiling. Time you knew you weren't alone anymore. Tears pricked Christy's eyes as she joined them at the work table. Together, they prepared enough food to feed all the helpers, their hands moving in the ancient rhythm of women working in harmony. Outside, the new barn frame rose steadily against the darkening sky. Sam worked beside men who days ago had shunned his company, their shared labor healing old wounds. The children played together, weaving between the workers with offers of water and innocent chatter, as dusk settled over the land. Lanterns were lit and hung from the partial rafters. The warm light cast long shadows as the men secured the last beams. Though much work remained, the basic structure stood solid and true. "Supper's ready." Christy called from the porch, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air. The workers set aside their tools and gathered in Sam's home. Every available space filled with people, some standing, others seated on makeshift benches. Children perched on stairs, balanced bowls on their knees. Sam stood at the head of his table, surveying the crowded room. The same house that had felt so empty after his wife's passing now overflowed with life and fellowship. He bowed his head to offer grace. "Lord," he prayed, his quiet voice reaching every corner, "we thank thee for bringing light from darkness and friendship from fear. Bless this food and those who prepared it, and bless this gathering of thy people, united in thy love. Amen. Amen." The room echoed softly. Bowls were passed, bread was broken, and conversation flowed easily. The children told excited tales of the day's events, while adults spoke of plans to finish the barn raising. Christy moved among them, refilling plates and cups, her face glowing with welcome. As the meal drew to a close, Elder Miller stood. "Brother Samuel," he said formally, "we owe you and Sister Christy an apology. We let fear guide our hearts instead of faith. But you showed us a better way." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Sam ducked his head, uncomfortable with praise, but grateful for the acceptance it represented. After the last guest departed and the children were tucked into bed, Christy found Sam on the porch. He stood in his customary quiet way, gazing at the new barn frame silvered by starlight. "Sam," she said softly, joining him at the railing, "I need to thank you properly. When the whole world seemed set against me, you offered shelter. When others saw danger, you saw truth, was only following the Lord's leading." Sam replied simply, "No." Christy shook her head. "You chose to believe in me when no one else would. That choice changed everything." Sam turned to face her, his expression gentle in the lamplight spilling from the window. The evening breeze carried the sweet scent of new-cut timber and fresh hay, promising tomorrow's work and healing. Inside, the house still held warmth from the gathered community. Through the window came the soft sound of Ruth humming one of Christy's hymns as she prepared for bed. The simple melody spoke of home and belonging, of fears overcome and peace restored. Spring painted the Colorado hills in tender greens as new life stirred across Sam's homestead. The barn skeleton had grown steadily over the weeks, each beam and board a testament to determination. Sam worked from sunrise to sunset, his skilled hands shaping wood while Christy and the children tended to other needs. Ruth and Daniel helped. Christy prepared the soil for planting, their small fingers dropping seeds into neat furrows. Thomas, no longer fearful of shadows, trailed after them with a watering can nearly as big as himself. Together, they planted rows of corn, beans, and pumpkins. With herbs and flowers marking the borders, "These will bloom just as summer comes," Christy explained, showing Ruth how to space the marigold seedlings. The girl's face brightened at the promise of colors to come. As dusk approached one mild evening, Sam finished securing the last rafter. The new barn stood proud and tall, its fresh timbers gleaming in the fading light. He found Christy on the porch, watching the children chase fireflies in the yard. "The Lord has blessed us with peace again," Sam said softly. Settling beside her on the bench, Christy nodded, noting the troubled edge in his voice. "Something weighs on your heart, Sam." He was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped together. "I fear," he began, then faltered. "I fear I'm forgetting Rachel, my late wife. Her face grows dimmer in my mind with each passing day." Christy turned to face him, her expression gentle. "The heart doesn't forget, Sam, it only makes room for more love." She touched the quilt draped over the bench one Rachel had made. "Your memories of her are woven into everything here, like these stitches. They're part of who you are. But this peace you've brought," Sam's voice wavered. "The laughter in the house, the hymns at evening time, I never thought to feel such contentment again. Sometimes the joy feels like a betrayal. Rachel would want your heart to heal," Christy said softly. Honoring her memory doesn't mean closing the door to new beginnings. Sam's eyes met hers, filled with understanding. Without speaking, they bowed their heads together in prayer. asking for guidance and courage to embrace the future God had set before them. The children's laughter drifted up from the yard, mingling with the evening birdsong. As the first stars appeared, peace settled over the homestead like a blessing, wrapping them all in its gentle embrace. The rebuilt barn cast long shadows across Sam Lapp's homestead as evening settled over the Colorado hills. Inside the sturdy house, lamplights spilled golden warmth across the supper table, where simple dishes waited: steaming potatoes, fresh churned butter, garden vegetables, and thick slices of ham. Christy Bell moved with quiet grace, setting a freshly baked loaf of bread in the center of the table. The crusty round loaf, still warm from the oven, sent a homey aroma through the room. Her boy Thomas sat between Daniel and Ruth, their faces bright with anticipation for the meal. "Pass the plates, please," Christy said, smoothing her apron. The children handed them around eagerly, their earlier games in the yard having stirred healthy appetites. Sam took his place at the head of the table, his weathered hands folded. The lamplight caught the silver threading through his dark hair, earned through months of rebuilding both barn and trust. His family, old and new, bowed their heads as he spoke. "Lord," Sam began, his deep voice gentle, "we thank thee for thy deliverance and mercy, for bringing light from darkness and hope from fear, for new beginnings that grow like spring wheat after winter's trials, for the peace that passes understanding, and for gathering us here as family. Amen." "Amen," the others echoed softly. The meal passed in comfortable joy, with the children trading stories about their day's adventures. Thomas described helping Daniel feed the new calf, while Ruth proudly told of the first sprouts appearing in her herb garden. Their laughter melded with the clink of forks and the peaceful sounds of sharing food. After the dishes were cleared, the children gathered by the hearth. Ruth started humming a hymn she'd learned from Christy, and soon all three joined in, their young voices rising sweet and clear in the evening air. Sam stepped to the doorway, gazing out at the barn that stood strong against the deepening twilight. Its fresh timbers glowed with the last light of day, a testament to community restored and faith renewed. The evening star had just appeared, bright and steady above the roof peak. He sensed Christy's presence before she spoke, her footsteps soft on the wooden floor as she joined him at the door. The children's singing provided a gentle backdrop to the moment. "They called you dangerous," Sam said quietly, turning to face her. His eyes held a depth of understanding that made Christy's heart quicken. "Yet you brought me peace instead." Christy smiled through sudden tears, the lamplight catching their shimmer. She didn't speak, but her expression held all the gratitude and joy her heart couldn't contain in words. Behind them, the children's voices lifted in perfect harmony on a familiar hymn, one that spoke of grace and shelter found. Sam and Christy exchanged a look of quiet joy, understanding passing between them without need for speech. Here, in this moment, was the fruition of mercy's work, a home transformed by truth, a family bound by love and peace, hard-won but lasting. The homestead settled into evening's embrace, no longer a place of loss and loneliness, but alive with the warmth of hearts restored and hope renewed. Thanks for watching. Stories like this shape us in ways we don't always expect. If something resonated, subscribe. I'm back tomorrow with another one worth hearing.